Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Transformational Tuesday. It's Transformational Tuesday this morning. We're talking about the shutdown signal, reclaiming your power in the trigger. Reclaiming your power in the trigger, you guys. Listen, what's one trigger that you're ready to stop hiding from? What's one trigger you're ready to stop hiding from and start healing through? I want you to know that you're no longer just talking to yourself about what happened, right? We did that yesterday when we talked about stories. Now I want you to take a deeper look in how you respond, right? In how you're responding, right? Without even realizing it. Here's some triggers, right? The emotional landmines that happen, right? The triggers that are rooted in past experiences, not the present truth, right? And these internal alerts that tell us like something feels unsafe here. Right, listen, most people they think that they're shutting down because of the situation, okay, but they're actually shutting down because of unresolved stories or wounds being activated, you guys. I want you to know that setbacks don't just test your vision, right? They trigger your nervous system, whether it's rejection, whether it's delay, or whether it's failure. Okay, the body remembers. The body remembers. Good morning, Pep. The body remembers, right? So your reaction is real, but it may be rooted in, but it may not be rooted in a current truth, you guys, right? It may be rooted in childhood patterns, survival modes, right? Old definitions of failure or not being enough. All right. And listen, when you don't identify your trigger, you surrender your power. That's what this is all about, right? You're surrendering your power, right? So we have to name it, right? To get our authority back. So examples of that, we're going to talk about it like in today's lesson, right? You know, this week we're talking about navigation, like navigating our obstacles, right? How to really keep going when life doesn't go as planned. So, good morning, good morning. How to keep going when life doesn't go as planned. We know that this whole series is on seizing control of our life with the purpose, right? And the the whole idea is what setbacks really make us shut down, right? Why are we not moving forward in our life? So why am I talking about this? Because the biggest threat to moving forward, to forward motion, isn't the obstacle. It isn't the obstacle that we have, right? It's the emotional trigger that makes you question your ability to overcome it. All right. So too often people confuse their reaction for reality, right? But the nervous system isn't your destiny, you guys. So in today's session, it's really about reclaiming clarity so that you can stop shutting down and really start standing tall, even when it gets hard. All right. Good morning, big little brother. All right. Uh, my disclaimer for this morning, this session will bring awareness to what activates your emotional shutdown reflex. All right. But transformation happens when you really choose to challenge your response and support your healing. All right. You can't control the trigger, but you can control the story that you attach to that trigger. So I want to welcome you back. I want to welcome you back to Life Lessons with Dr. Sheila Little. If you're new here, okay, I am Dr. Sheila Little, the creator of the Stop and Now mythology, licensed clinical social worker, licensed clinical therapist, and life coach, right? And life is an acronym. Um, Love of self, interactions with others, focus in emotions, and life lessons is truly a part of Project Life, right? Where we turn theory into practice. And it's Transformational Tuesday, right? And on today, we're really talking about what shuts you down. Okay, what shuts you down? Not from shame, but from compassion. Okay, we're not going to shame ourselves. We're just going to be curious about what shuts me down and really have some compassion about that on this morning. All right, because the truth is, we all get triggered. That's the truth. We all get triggered. But when we learn how to recognize it, when we learn how to name it and respond from that truth, you know, you shut down. I mean, you shift from emotional survival to really like this kind of sovereignty, right? This divine sovereignty or this knowing, right, of who I am. And I think that that yields a level of compassion, right? All right, so drop a word in the chat and let me know how you're feeling this morning. How are you feeling this morning? It's Tuesday, so I work out today. I changed my workout plan. Um, so I'm going to work out. So that feels good. It's Transformational Tuesday. I'm just happy to be moving my body. When I'm always creating like the life lessons for every day or working with my clients, I find that there's a lot of energy being generated. And so the activity really is a form of me like expressing that. So if it's dancing, if it's moving my body, like I need to move this energy in my body. All right. So let's get present with our bodies. Okay. So we know that we've already done what we're supposed to do this morning, right? Really getting present with ourselves, told ourselves some sweet things. I love you, being compassionate with ourselves this morning. But let's make sure that we're doing that. So we're going to scan our body, feel our feet on the floor. All right. All right. We're going to start with our feet, not our feet. We're going to start with our feet on the floor, right? And then our legs. Okay. And, every life lesson I want you to experience compassion. All right. So we're going to have compassion for ourselves as we scan our bodies, right? Some forgiveness, some love, right? So we're bringing that into it. It's okay if you don't know what that feels like. Okay. But just embody it. Just know that it's happening, whether you feel it or not, because I think that's another thing that we if we lived in homes that were in survival mode, a lot of emotions we don't know what it feels like. Okay. And so because we don't know what it feels like, we don't believe it's happening, but we're just calling in compassion, whether you know what that feels like or not. That's calling into our feet, our legs, right? Let's call in love, whether you know what it feels like or not. Okay. Into our thighs, right? If you're sitting down, your butt on the seat, right? Just calling in some compassion and love and some forgiveness to this vessel, right? That really got us to today. All right. If you're standing up, feel your legs. If you're laying down, wiggle your toes, right? Just say a thank you to this vessel. All right, up our torso, our spine, right? All of the nerves in our spines, right? That's communicating to our nervous system, all right? Feeling each one kind of align itself. Our organs, let's bring some love and compassion into those. Maybe it's a little forgiveness for probably not feeding it or giving it what we know we should, but it's there, right? And it's this digesting what we're giving it. So we want to thank you for that. Our hearts, right? Really feeling our hearts, filling it with compassion, thanking it for still sustaining us and beating and allowing the blood to flow through. All right. And again, just bringing some love into our hearts. Again, a lot of times we want this from other people, but the practice in these life lessons is to really take a time to give it to ourselves, right? So some forgiveness, some love, some compassion all around our shoulders. Let's bring some attention to that. Okay. Feeling that weight just kind of melt away on this morning, right? This transformational Tuesday morning, just letting go of the yesterdays and mentally preparing ourselves for the present and the future. All right, down our arms, activating our hands. Again, if it's something that we want to get done today, putting that courage there, that energy in our hands to do the things, right, manually that we need to take care of. All right, up our necks, our lips, okay, our nose, eyes, right? Just clearing, allowing us for some clarity, allowing us to breathe, right? This great prana, right? Okay. In our ears, right? Just activating that ear chakra so we can hear differently. We can hear with some compassion. We can hear with some love, right? Just softening. I tell people I'm saying it softly, right? It may sound hard, but I want you to receive it softly. All right. So let's put some softness around our ears. Right. And then activate our brains, right? We're learning a lot in these life lessons, and sometimes it can be a little much to digest, right? But we want the brain to know that that's what it was created for, right? And because of neuroplasticity, we know that these neurons are rewiring each other and refiring. So we just want to bring some compassion, some thank you, some love to the brain. All right. All right. And then the space around us, our biggest organ, our skin, right? That's holding it all together. That's where a lot of our nerves are, right? That's signaling us for things. So just having some compassion with that. Okay. All right. All right. So, any words this morning? Again, I'm good. Okay. Are you good? Put a heart in the chat if you're good. All right. So, our powerful quote this morning is: the trigger is not the end of the road, you guys. It's a signal that part of you is still looking to be healed. All right. That part of you is still looking for healing. All right. And that's okay. All right. Because listen, I knew a man in one of my workshops that told me every time someone critiques my work, I immediately shut down. No, not because they're wrong, but because I hear my father's voice telling me I'll never measure up. All right. Now, this man, he grew up in I would say like a alcoholic home, where there was a lot of substance abuse. All right. So every time he heard someone critique him, he would immediately shut down, not because that they were wrong, but because he heard his father's voice telling him that he'll never measure up. Right. This critique wasn't a threat, you guys. The trigger was he wasn't reacting to that feedback. Okay. He was reacting to the old story inside of him. Once we named that trigger, he began to reclaim his confidence and not really avoiding criticism, but by rewriting the story behind it. Listen, you can't heal what you won't name. All right. I think Jay-Z said it. You can't heal what you won't reveal. Okay. All right. I think that's how Jay-Z said it. So you can't heal what you won't name, and you can't shift what you keep spiritualizing as discernment when it's really just a defense mechanism. Okay, it's just your body doing what it was created to do. Now, is that a form of spiritual discernment? Yes, it is. But sometimes we do use spiritual discernment as bypassing. Okay, as bypassing. All right. So as we check in today with our hearts, I want you to ask yourself, what is one emotion or emotional reaction that you've been mislabeling as just how I am, or in what is the truth underneath that? All right, what's the truth underneath that? Because a lot of times we're being triggered, and I do want to say this because I think we get triggered and we don't even know we're being triggered in the moment. Okay, and when we don't really know that we're being triggered in a moment, what can happen is we'll act out, we'll respond to the old narrative, but what we don't do is go back and clean up. All right. And sometimes you don't even have to go back to that space and clean it up. It will be compassionate too, but your own awareness, right? Like, what happened right there? Was it really about that situation, or was this something in me, right? Was it something in me being stirred up, right? Was that really an obstacle um before me that I saw the right way, or did I experience that from a wounded me, right? And not the wise me. All right, listen, triggers are not the problem, you guys. Avoidance is. All right. Many people have been taught to don't be sensitive, again, just push through it, right? You're overreacting. So what do? Right? They numb out, they shut down, they distract themselves, and then they blame others, right? They blame others or themselves. All right. Listen, avoiding a trigger doesn't deactivate it. It just delays your healing. Let me say that. Avoiding a trigger, it doesn't deactivate the trigger. It just delays your healing. All right. What you avoid emotionally, you recreate behaviorally. All right. So what you're avoiding in your emotions, your behaviors will compensate for that. All right. All right. So when we see people acting out, when we see people excessive in their behaviors, if it's spending, um if it's binge watching, if it's sex, if it's substances, right? It's typically some emotional avoidance happening. But guess what? That energy has to move, right? It has to be expressed. And so we are recreated in our behaviors. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. Okay. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. All right. Listen, triggers are clues, not curses. All right. They're clues, not curses. All right. So a trigger says this still needs attention. All right. This was unsafe once. All right. This used to hurt. Are you ready to heal now? Those are the type of um messages that the trigger is on the backside of that trigger. truly asking. Okay, that's what it's truly asking. And you can reframe the trigger, all right, as an invitation, right? Because every trigger is a teacher. It's not trying to break you, it's trying to bring you back to yourself, right? And I often say back to yourself, or it's trying to blossom you into who you were created to be. A lot of times we talk about back to, I want to go back to how things used to be, to anything to avoid this moment. Good morning, Miss Jackie. All right, anything to truly avoid this moment, we're trying to go back and do something. All right, so this back is not going back to any past space. All right, back to yourself, meaning the person that was on the route to blossoming, okay? And that situation happened, that trauma happened, that shifted you, all right? That experience happened that triggered you, and it took you off course, all right? And so you stopped developing in a healthy way, right? And you started to develop coping habits or unhealthy habits that wasn't aligned, right, with who you were created to become, right? Or the detour that happened to strengthen you, right? To become the experiences that you needed to go through to become the resilient person that needed to see to see the goal. This is what's coming up in my spirit. So, but a lot of times we get stuck in the detour. All right. Sometimes we get a lot of times, it's not sometimes, a lot of times we get stuck in the detour. That shift, that experience, it's like, okay, you were created to, understand pain at a level because you needed to understand pain and forgiveness at a level because of an experience that you're going to experience in your life. And so you may have experienced goodness, 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 and then something happened that caused you pain. All right. And now you got stuck in the pain. And when you're stuck in that pain, right, you just keep reliving it over and over and over again versus learning from it and then getting back on course, right? And a lot of people are stuck, right, in that first experience as a child, in that first experience as these innocent beings, right? Where when you became an adult, you're supposed to take all of that and learn from it and heal from it so you can get back on course, right? To finish your growth and evolution as an adult, but you're still stuck. I heard a preacher say yesterday, I was 50 and 12 at the same time. I thought that was so powerful. He was like, I was 50 and 12 at the same time. Like, I'm this preacher speaking to thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people. I'm this leader, you know what I mean? But there's a 12-year-old in me that's still looking to be saved. There's a 12-year-old in me looking for my daddy to come and pick me up. There's a 12-year-old in me that's still broken, about the situation that happened. So like I'm 50 and 12 at the same time. And I'm like, that is so powerful that he, said that because a lot of people are 60 and 12, 30 and 12, 40 and 2, you know what I mean? Because they're stuck in that experience and whatever they desire in that experience, they still want it. I'm watching the series Lucifer, and I love this series because I feel like, it's so it's just so eye opening. I know a lot of people don't want to watch the series because it's called Lucifer, but one of the things that Lucifer talks about is like people stuck in their own guilt and like hell kind of being this loop of your own guilt, your own shame that you keep reliving over and over again. And he said the gates are open, right? He was like, do you know how many people live in hell? The door is open. They can get out at any time, but they're so stuck in their shame and their guilt, in their pain that they won't even break it, right? They don't even find compassion and forgiveness for themselves to really walk away from this deep cycle of guilt, that all people hold, right? So I think it's important when we talk about getting back to ourselves, what loop have we been caught in of guilt, of shame, of this emotion, right? That's keeping us from getting back on the path that was created for us with the lesson from that pain. Okay. or the blessing from that pain. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. Again, because triggers are clues, not curses, right? Um, this still needs attention. Again, this is unsafe. This used to hurt, right? Are we ready to heal? Again, every trigger is a teacher, right? It's not there to break you. It's trying to bring you back to yourself. All right. Listen, if you are overachiever, if you one of those caregivers, if you have that empathetic kind of like empathy where you feel for other people or you give to other people more than you give to yourself, or you find yourself saying yes to people and just constantly giving. Listen, triggers often show up as control. Okay. Listen, they often you don't often shut down, right, in the traditional sense, right? You go into overthinking, over controlling, right, over responsibility, right? So the trigger isn't for people who are functioning, right, over functioning and like caregivers and givers. Typically what'll happen is when you get triggered, you will overthink. Right, you will over control the situation or the things that you can control in a situation, or you become over responsible, right? So you just get, you start to take care of everybody's problems, or you're the one that's responsible for the whole family, in their situation. Over controlling, right? You're everybody has to do things how you want it to get done. I see people who, either becomes the helicopter parents, or you may be working with a person and you're just like, why is this person so controlling? And I say, you never know what people are going through or managing in their personal life that they're bringing into their professional world. And that's the space where they're safe, right, to really express it, whether it's healthy or not. And a lot of times it don't have nothing to do with you. And then the overthinker, right? Just thinking like, how could I have done this different? What could I do more? Like, how could I have more? The chatter gets loud. And I want to talk about the chatter because although I say that we have permission to have these conversations as the navigator and the me, myself, and I, there is a level of chatter that is overwhelming, right? There is a level of chatter that, is like loud, loud, right? And we work with those people and we have diagnosis for that type of chatter. So there's a level of chatter that is very healthy, right? But there is a level of chatter where people are trying to escape it because it's just so loud and over consuming, right? That you really can't even sleep at night because you have no control over it. All right. In those cases, we really want to get calm. We want to step back from our thoughts, right? We want to go see a therapist to really see like what is causing this. Is it the anxiety? Is it the depression? If you need some psychotropic medication to really help balance the nervous system or the chemical imbalance, right? Then I encourage you to do those things because although there's a level of conversation that we're having in our minds at all times, right, there is a level of like overthinking. All right. Miss Jackie said, I'm an overthinker. And I get that, right? I get that being an overthinker. I think I definitely was an overthinker and in a season of my life where and I was the fixer, right? Where I'm truly trying to fix everything. Like, how can I do this? And it gave me analysis paralysis, right? Where I'm thinking, but not really doing anything. And I'm figuring out how to do it. How should I do it the perfect way? How can I say this the perfect way? And it's just a whole lot of chatter. What ends up happening in those places, thank you, Miss Jackie, for sharing that. And anybody else who finds themselves as the overthinker, the over controller, or the over responsible one, right? In those times, I want you to kind of sit back and think like, what is going on? Because as the overthinker, right, we are prone to now distract ourselves, right, from whatever that is. So if I'm an overthinker, to cut off the thoughts, I may go do, right, those unhealthy behaviors like eat more, sleep more, binge watch, social media, right? And all of those serve as distractions. So I won't what? Hear the behavior that is coming up. Why? Because I'm avoiding the emotion. All right, because I'm avoiding that emotion. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. Listen, this restrict the trigger response is really let me fix everything so I can feel safe again. That's all that is, right? The overthinking, the over controlling, the over responsible. It's just like, let me fix everything so I can feel safe again. All right. Like, if your first response to stress is controlling everything, listen, that's not strength. That's a survival reflex. Okay, that is your survival reflex, and that's okay. We just want to, it's okay to become aware that you're in your survival reflex when you're trying to control everything. All right. And again, I want us to take away the rigidity or the rigidness of control, because I think that when we think, it's so funny. I talk to clients. I have this one client, she's an older lady, and she's very controlling, very controlling of her kids. And like, she had a son that was going through a divorce, and like she had a daughter and they got kids, and and so they are, navigating their relationship. And she comes to our session to really unpack that. And I'm like, but you're not just doing that with them. Like, you may be known as the person that's, in a sense, nosy in everybody's business. She's like, I am. And you know what's funny? My mom is too. My mom is just like that. So a lot of these behaviors we caught, and she was like, and I deem to not be like my mom, but I find myself doing the same things that I saw my mom do. And right now, like her mom, even though they have a loving relationship, they go back and forth because both of them share this controlling everything type of attitude, right? And so she becomes very resistant to her mother controlling tactics, just like her kids become resistance to her controlling tactics. So again, where did you learn that at, right? Was your mother the over controller? Was your auntie the over controller? Like, some of these behaviors we caught, we saw it, it affected us so much, but then we became that thing. All right, we became the very thing that we didn't, want to experience. All right. Listen, spiritually triggers show up for us. I also want to say that spiritually triggers show up for us when we still don't trust the God within. This is so important. All right. Um, Listen, the area where you get most triggered is often the area where you still believe you're alone. All right. That you're alone. All right. When you remember that there is a divine um, there's a divinity that is within you. Listen, you begin to trust your discernment again. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to rest in your truth, not your trauma. All right. I want you to know that even though a lot of individuals are practicing God on the outside, right, and praying for God on the outside, there's still a disbelief that there's a God that dwells in me. Okay, that there's a piece of spirituality that is within me. And a lot of people feel either they're disconnected from that, like they've done something so wrong that they have to do something to get that back, right? In some way, it's this transactional act of, how do I prove to God that I am, that I am so good that he will, be, live within me. And it's just like, no, God is within you, right? There's a divinity within you that's compassionate. That's the whole story of, Yahshua the Messiah, right? The Messiah came to what? To die for your sins, right? So that everyone could have that ability to, activate this divinity within them. So a lot of us are still feel alone, like we're doing it alone, and you're not, right? You may be physically right by yourself, but you are connected, right, to a creation that is so, that is connected to everything else. You know what I mean? And that is working on your behalf at all times. And we have to like lean into that and trust that. You know what I mean? And that's where faith comes in. But that's also vulnerable, right? But it's the faith. It's the thing you don't see. All right. And when we can't see it, right, we get triggered, and now we're trying to control the outcome. And so many of our behaviors are to what? To control the outcome, because I don't trust that there is this divinity, there's God that's working on my behalf with me, all right, and through me, right, and through others, right, to assist me in this thing called life. All right. All right. Listen, a trigger isn't a flaw. All right. And if one thing over these series, I just want us to stop, you know, judging triggers as a flaw, right? It's a flag, right? Really just alerting you to something tender, to something unfinished, and to something unspoken. All right. So when you pause instead of power through, right? You start healing in real time. Again, we talked about that pivot yesterday. And again, I go back to the basketball player. He pivoted. He got one foot down. All right. Right. And he's moving around what? The defender, right? Until he finds a space where he can what? Where he can dribble and get to the basket or dribble and make the pass. All right. And we have to learn that the trigger can be a pivot, but we still stand grounded. It's just saying, hey, it's alerting us that something is tender, something is unfinished, and something is unspoken here, right? That we now need to activate. All right. It's kind of like the darkness that we need to bring some light to. All right. And not judge and keep hiding from it. All right. Now, here's what's coming up in my spirit. Sometimes you don't know it in that moment. Right. Sometimes you don't know like the pivot. So you may travel, you may charge, you may do that. Right. And that's fine. That's fine. Because maybe that was the thing that needed to happen so that you can learn the lesson, right? So that you can learn what you need to learn to be able to, to do it the next time, right? And be aware of it the next time. All right. So when you pause, right, instead of power through, you start healing in real time. Like, hey, and that pause can happen right after the trigger. It can happen before the trigger. And traditionally, in my experience, it starts to happen in discovery stage. It happens after, right? You didn't blew up, you didn't trigger yourself, like you didn't got triggered, and then that pause kind of happens. Like, what happened? What was that? You know what I mean? I'm shifting, I'm changing, and what ends up happening is the cycle of guilt and shame and judgment. Because I wanted to not do that thing, and I end up doing it again, and I must not be as healed as I thought I was. And it's like, no, that's not the pause we're talking about. We're talking about a pause where you're like, oh, I see it. And the more you see it and the more you recognize, the more that time gets shorter. All right. The more the distance between your pause gets shorter to where you start to pause as the trigger is happening. Right. As it's happening, you like, okay, I'm being triggered. What is this about? All right. All right. Listen, if you can't name your trigger, you'll repeat it. Right. Um, you'll repeat your shutdown over and over and over again, or you're overthinking over and over, or you're overcompensating over and over and over again. But if you can name it, guess what? You can shift it and then take your authority back. Okay. And take your authority back. When you understand your triggers, you no longer at war with yourself. All right. You can move forward without abandoning a part of you that once felt unsafe. All right. All right, that once felt unsafe. Um, I knew a person. I always ghosted people when I got overwhelmed. I always ghosted people when I got overwhelmed until I realized I was triggered by the fear of disappointing someone. Now I set boundaries instead of disappearing. Now, this individual was a guy that I was dating, a guy that I was talking to that was dating. He lived in California. He was like from Africa. All right. But he would go back and forth from New York to, he'll go back and forth from New York to California. And he, had a lot of resources, but he came to me because he would ghost people all the time. Like he would just ghost women. And he wanted to know, like, why I meet these women, they're available. Like, why am I always ghosting them? Right. And what we realized is that he had this fear of disappointing them. He had a background, again, he was from Africa. So he had a background where there was a lot put on him, right, to perform. And he really didn't feel like he could provide, once that relationship got to a certain level, he really didn't feel like he could provide or be that man, right, that the woman needed. Okay. And so he would go. He didn't have the language for that at the time. But as we unpacked that, that's what we realized that he had a fear of really disappointing, someone else, right? And so it was coming up in my spirit, and I think why I blurted out dated him in before is because I work with a lot of women who date, and they get ghosted, right? And it was like two things trying to come out at once. So I work with a lot of women and they get ghosted. And maybe guys, you guys get ghosted too. And I think that people personalize it like it's something to do with me. And a lot of times we don't realize that people are wrestling with their own stuff, right? So they may feel like, oh, I'm liking this person too much. Let me back up, oh, am I really ready for that? And we don't really know what stories that we're triggering in other people. So sometimes the ghost just ain't about you. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's their pattern of moving in and moving out, ghosting and things like that. And it has nothing to do with you. But so many women in the dating scene, are becoming stained and like, well, what more could I've done? Like, how could I have showed up more? And it's like that probably had nothing to do with you. It probably was the person feeling overwhelmed, right? And just shut down. And I tell you, 9 times out of 10, the guy would come back, right? Text, what you doing, how you doing, my bad, months later. But she's so like mad and upset that she won't respond to the text. And so it's like this emotional regulation. I'm not saying that she should have responded to the text. I'm saying that because her understanding and she took it so personal, like, don't come back now, right? And we have to have compassion for people, whether we want to continue to talk to them or not, to really have compassion for their pattern and their behavior. And we have to give that to ourselves. All right. Listen, trauma informed neuropsychology shows that identifying emotional triggers really reduce the intensity of stress responses and increases emotional resilience over time. So we definitely want to identify our emotional triggers. When we start to identify our emotions, right, what we will see is our behaviors will start to change, right? So we will become more aware of our behaviors. Why? Because we're moving those neuropeptides in our body. We're healing this emotional space, which is giving room for our behaviors to shift because now our behaviors are not overcompensating for our lack of emotions. All right. All right. And as a consequence, then we're not shutting down or overcompensating in these behaviors, right? And so we find more balance. And as a consequence, we find more healing. All right. All right. All right. Listen, you don't have to keep shutting down to stay safe. All right. You believe that, don't you? Right. You don't have to keep shutting down to stay safe. There's other ways that you can show up in your life to establish that safety. All right. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. All right, listen, we know that the T in stop it truly stands for triggers because what silences your voice isn't the obstacle, okay? It's not the obstacle that's before you. It's not the thing that you're navigating, right? It's the obstacle, it's what the obstacle activates. All right. Um you're not just navigating around pain, you're learning how to meet that with wisdom. All right, you're learning how to meet that with wisdom. Listen, triggers distort the obstacle. All right, remember this week we're talking about navigating obstacles. It's the last part of seizing control of your life with a plan. And what typically happens is you're going to face obstacles, right? You're going to come up against some resistance in your life. And what we have done is we have allowed that resistance, I'm going to say what that resistance feels like, we've created a story for it. Okay. And that story has truly kept us from moving forward, right? Because we've created a story that either this is not for me, something must be wrong with me, I'm not enough. Now, those stories are stories that we caught or that we taught ourselves. Okay. All right. That we caught when we was little or that we were taught. Okay. We bring those into the present moment. We feel this resistance, one, because we're not giving the resistance permission to be there. Okay. Right. And so we need to learn how to navigate this. And the conversation today is about triggers because these triggers often distort those obstacles. So when you're being triggered, you're no longer responding to what's in front of you. All right. You're reacting to what's behind you and hasn't been healed. And that's the difference between the wounded you and the wise you. When you're being triggered, right? The trigger is an invitation for the wise you to get present. I always give this example. When you're being triggered, it's an opportunity for you to pause, to kind of say like what's happening and get present, right? Something is about to happen. Some shift is about to occur. Some lesson is about, this is just an invitation. All right. Let me be present enough to, if I can't do anything to really understand what this invitation is, maybe it's for me to understand me more. Maybe it's for me to heal more. Maybe it's for me to listen more, whatever it is that I may need. But what we tend to do is we have been programmed to allow that trigger to allow us to shut down. All right. All right. We'll shut down. And then we'll justify the shutdown because we'll say, what? I was triggered. You know, I hit him because I was triggered. I cussed him out because I was triggered, and we've used this word trigger, and we've basically supported unhealthy behavior, right? In the name of being triggered. All right. But listen, when you're triggered, you're no longer responding to what's in front of you, right? You're actually reacting to what was behind you and hadn't been healed. All right. So the obstacle itself is neutral, right? The obstacle itself is neutral, but the trigger turns it into the threat, right? It's what you bring into that's turning that obstacle into a threat, because the obstacle is going to be there. The resistance is going to be there. All right. Listen, whether you're a high achieving man, right, who grew up with a powerful mom, or, whether you are the hopeless romantic, right, whether you're the person on your healing journey, right, looking to be transformed, right, whether you're the woman who has mother wounds, right, it doesn't matter, right? Um, with the unavailable mother, I'm sorry, whether you're the woman with the unavailable mother, listen, the obstacle, right, may make you hit resistance and immediately think, I can't handle this. All right. This always happens to me, right? This is why I never trust anyone, right? And it's not even the situation. It is what you had to experience by being in relationship with what? With those entities, right? With that mother, with that absent father, being bullied, whatever that was, right? You developed a narrative. So the trigger really shapes how you see the obstacle, not how the obstacles really are. All right. All right. And here's what I want you to bring into that. Bring an aha moment. Oh, that makes sense. Right. But also bring compassion with you, right? Some compassion for you, because it's like this is what you were taught to do. All right. And that's why the obstacle is not the thing that you're seeking safety from, right? It's a nervous system. It's like your nervous system truly trying to regulate you, right? And not allow you to feel that pain again. All right. Listen, if you don't name the trigger, you will mislabel the lesson. All right. So here's the thing, you're smart, right? You feel deeply, whether you know it or not. Because some people say I don't care. And it's like you care. Actually, you care too deep, right? That's the problem. You detach from your deep the deep feeling that you have in you. You just detach from it. That's why it's bothering you. That's why you're angry. The law of polarity is, you if you so angry, that means that there's some love. There's still some attachment here. Okay, all right. So you're smart. You're a deep feeling person, and you're aware, right? Um, and self-aware to a point, right? To a certain degree. But when you hit setbacks, you may find yourself quitting too early, right? Internalizing blame, right? And then shrinking from your goals, what? To feel safe. Okay, to feel safe. Why? Because the nervous system is saying the last time this happened, you got hurt, right? Let's not do that again. Right? The last time this happened, fill in the blank. So let's not do that again. Right. And then we'll have conversations about it to support it. Right. All right. So listen, instead of extracting the wisdom from the obstacle, what'll end up happening is that you are repeating the wound over and over again. Listen, you can't navigate clearly, when the trigger is driving the car. All right. When the trigger is driving the car. All right. Again, you can't navigate clearly when the trigger is driving the car. Put a one in the chat, that makes sense. All right. Listen, triggers aren't a sign to stop. They're a signal to support yourself, right? They're a signal to get to support yourself. All right. Most people really misunderstand the trigger for a gut feeling to pull back, right? Or a sign that this must not be for me. Right. So most people really misunderstand the trigger for this gut feeling, right? Got this good feeling, so I must pull back, or a sign that this must not be for me. But most of the time, it's just a part of them asking to be acknowledged, right? So maybe they need emotional support. Maybe their nervous system needs emotional grounding. Maybe, there's some permission to provide, maybe it's some permission to proceed gently without abandoning themselves. And so, yeah, you may get this feeling in your stomach. You may feel tense in your body. But again, I say that is the appetite. It's calling for something. It's calling for something. It may be calling for you to, get safe, to ground yourself, right? To really do anything, but not abandon you. All right, not abandon you. Listen, your trigger isn't saying stop. It's saying, can you feel safe moving forward this time? Can you feel safe moving forward this time? And here's the thing, if you can't, okay. So now what do you need to do to move safe? That is your job, right? That is your job, not to push through, not to go anyway. But when you ask yourself, can you feel safe to move forward this time? And you choose no, that's okay. All right. Now, what do you need to feel safe? Okay. And then do the thing that you need. Maybe you need to talk about that. Maybe you need to express that. Maybe that's a point of contention that needs to be healed. Okay. All right. So then let's talk about it so we can move forward. All right, listen, unaddressed triggers become repeated obstacles. So if you don't really resolve the emotional response, right, the same kind of obstacles keep showing up in your relationships, in your profession at work, right, in your business, in your purpose, and in your boundaries, because the lesson hasn't been integrated. Okay. So you may say, why do I always end up here? Why does this keep happening to me? Why do I shut down in the same way every time? Right? Here's the truth, or the core truth, right? The obstacle isn't repeating itself to punish you. Okay. It's repeating itself to what? To free you, right? To free you, to heal you. All right. So when you understand your trigger, you take your authority back, right? And the obstacle becomes the teacher, not the tormentor. All right. It becomes the teacher and not the tormentor. And this is how we can shift from like emotional reactivity to emotional responsibility, right? And that trigger may always be there. It may be areas in your life where you may always get triggered in a certain way, and it's still an invitation to get present, right? To do, okay, I'm being triggered. Like, what do I need to do? Right, to ground myself, to let my nervous system know that I'm okay, right? Whatever that is, right? So even after recognizing it, it doesn't mean that it goes away immediately. Some of them may stay with you, all right? But life is truly about learning how to navigate. It's kind of like feeling like if you ride over a rocky road, like you're not going to feel the bumpiness. Now, some cars, right? You feel the bumpiness a lot. You know what I mean? You just a bumpy, right? And some cars is a smoother bumps, right? But there's a bumpy road, like so you're gonna feel the bumps, right? But some cars are made where you don't feel it as much, right? So when we learn how to navigate our obstacles, it's kind of like that. Like we can go from the type of being the type of vehicle that those bumps just shake us all around to really becoming a type of vehicle where I feel the bump, but it's not shaking me around as much. But because the road is rocky in itself, I'm going to feel something, right? And that's the thing. Like we're not going to run away from the feeling. All right. And I think that we're trying to get to a point in life where we just only want to experience one feeling, happiness, joy, and it's like No, you are a plethora of emotions, right? You're a plethora of emotions. There's something called an emotional wheel. Have I ever showed you guys the emotional wheel? I'm gonna show it tomorrow. I don't even think I have it on here. But there's something called emotional wheel. Here it is. All right. So this emotional wheel is like every emotion, right? Every emotion, right? So if you see you got happy, you got surprised, you got bad, fearful, angry, disgusted, right? Sad. But under those emotions is emotions. All right. So sometimes you're not just sad. Maybe you feel empty, right? Maybe you feeling some grief. Maybe you feeling lonely, right? And so when we can really use this emotional wheel to really understand like that there's so many emotions that I experience and I just can't experience this one side happy all the time, right? Or surprised all the time. Even under happiness, it's so many emotions that loving, creative, valued, peaceful, right? So there's so many uh emotions that's even tucked under happiness. But to think that I'm only going to experience one type of emotion in this lifetime, it's like, no, there's so many emotions to experience, in this life, right? So to avoid anything other than that, what I have to, it's as if that becomes the obstacle, and I'm justifying it with the story, right? So we really have to get in relationship with all of our emotions, all of them, all right, because they're not there to, discipline you or anything. That they're part of, your body doing what it needs to do to digest this thing called life. All right. Listen, triggers are a map, not a mistake. All right. If there's one thing that I want you to walk away with is that triggers really reveal where you need healing, not where you failed. All right. They really reveal where you need healing, not where you failed. Listen, that's two different energies. We talk about the same situation, but we're talking about how we're addressing it. Right. If I'm looking at this trigger as a space where I needed healing, okay, that's a space where I still need some healing, right? Versus this is a space where I failed. Even when you say that to yourself, you can feel the difference in the expansion of your energy and the shrinking of your energy. All right. So if you can stop seeing your emotional reactions as shameful, right, and start viewing it as like this divine invitation, this sacred invitation to pause, not panic, right? To get curious, not critical, and to support yourself, not silence, right? And self abandon. Guess what? The shift is the difference between emotional intelligence, right? Being emotional intelligence, right? And survival mode, right? So the shift is the difference between emotional intelligent living versus survival mode cycling. All right. Listen, because navigating obstacles is less about problem solving and more about pattern breaking. All right. It's less about problem solving and more about pattern breaking. All right. All right. Um, Most people think if I just knew what to do, I'd be okay. All right. But here, the work is deeper, right? It's not just about external clarity. It's really about emotional capacity, right? The emotional capacity to hold like uncertainty without self-abandonment. Okay. So obstacle navigation isn't about being tough. It's really about being truthful with yourself and tender, with your triggers and gentle with your triggers. All right. And the biggest thing, and I just showed you that emotional wheel, is really language. Okay. Right. Under having language, right? So having emotional language, not just logical tools. All right. So for any male or female, triggers may feel vague or invisible, right? So, when we can put language to it, like, what am I feeling? Where have I felt this before? What would safety look like? Right. This is, emotional literacy, right? Right. This is emotional literacy, and having emotional literacy is empowering, right? We talk about financial literacy, we talk about a whole lot of stuff, but a lot of us are emotionally illiterate, right? And so we have to become emotional. We have to have a level of emotional literacy where we can like be fluid and understand like what our emotions mean, right? Just like we become, financially, we have classes in financial literacy, right? So you can understand the difference between money and all of that. We need to do that for ourselves, all right? Because what one emotional trigger, because um because that is empowerment. So I want you to ask yourself, what's one emotional trigger that I've labeled as just being dramatic or that I'm weak or something like that, that actually just needs your compassion, that needs your compassion. Okay. That needs your compassion. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat. All right. So let's go into our biblical wisdom for this morning. All right. Listen, it is Psalms 41 and 1. All right. God is our refuge and strength and ever present help in trouble, right? So God is our refuge and strength and ever present help in trouble. Listen, you don't have to carry the weight of the trigger alone, right? The God within you is stable even when you're shaken. Okay, even when you're shaken. Listen, when a person is emotionally triggered, you know, you often feel unsafe, unseen, unworthy, alone in that emotional experience. All right. And this verse really reminds you that emotional safety is not just something external, right? It's something that you can tap into within, right? Through through that divine presence, right? So or through that divine presence in the spirit that lives within you. All right. Listen, I want to say it like this. Even when your nervous system goes into panic, all right, you have to believe that God is not panicking with you. All right. That the divinity in you is not panicking. All right. That that spirit within you is steady, it's present, it's calm, and it's clear, even when you are not. All right. So this verse anchors you back into your center, right? Not your trauma, not your performance, right? But the calm presence from within. All right. So the next time you get triggered, instead of trying to fix it, okay, instead of trying to do something, right? Be be present, pause, and say, listen, God is here. I am safe to feel, right? And I am not alone in this reaction, right? Because remember, a lot of us don't understand that we are not alone, right? We're spiritual beings having a human experience, okay? Because we're spiritual beings having a human experience, or energetic beings having a human experience, right? because we're because there's a part of us that's unseen, we have to know that that part of us that's unseen is connected to the creator. Okay, is connected to the creator. What's coming up in my spirit is, if you in a relationship, um married, and your husband or wife isn't home or on a trip, that don't make you unmarried. Just because their presence is not there, it wouldn't make you say, I'm not married. All right. If you're a girlfriend, boyfriend, right, just because you don't see that person doesn't mean that they're not your girlfriend or boyfriend. You work for a job. Okay. You may work for that job part time or full time. When you're not in that building, that doesn't mean that you're not an employee of that job. Okay, right? You understand that your absence, like being separated from it, doesn't or just because you're not physically there, that it doesn't like disconnect the relationship, right? So this ever-present divinity in you is always there, whether you see it or not, right? It's your birthright. It was given to you, right? As a child coming into. Okay. And so it's always there, it's always been there, and it'll always be there. Okay. Right. And it manifests itself a lot of times in physical form, what, through other people, right? Through other people and through how we connect with other people. But the divinity itself is always present. All right. So the next time you're triggered, instead of trying to fix it, just be present, breathe. Okay. Instead of doing, be present, breathe, pause, and say, God is here. I feel safe, and I'm not alone in this. All right. Put a 3 in the chat if that makes sense. All right. Our promise verse. Listen, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God goes with you. All right. Listen, the moment you face a trigger, I want you to know you're not alone. Courage isn't about feeling nothing, you guys. It's about trusting that you're covered as you walk through it. Listen, this isn't just about external battles. It's more about these internal ones. All right. When people are triggered, right? They second guess themselves. They get flooded with fear, right? They get very anxious, overwhelmed, right? They want to run or numb out, start to hide, right? Start to doubt themselves. All of these things just start to happen on the inside. All right. So this verse speaks directly to you by saying, even in your emotional activity, okay, you are not abandoned. All right. You can move forward without needing that trigger to disappear. All right. To not needing that to disappear. All right. I'm going to reframe it like this. God is not just with you when you're preaching, when you're praying, when you're performing. Okay. He is with you, right? This divinity is with you. God is with you when you want to hide, when you want to lash out, and when you want to shut down, when you having some anxiousness, when you having some depression, right? When you want to disconnect. In that moment, he still calls you strong. Okay. Right. He still calls you strong. All right. So this verse really reminds you that you can trust your discernment again, right? Not just because you never feel fear, but because you've learned to move in faith in the midst of the fear, right? In the midst of the anxiety, in the midst of the disbelief. I'm still going to keep moving forward as it is, as I'm hoping for, as I'm seeing it, even though I'm doubting it, even though I'm fearful, even though I have some doubts. I'm going to establish faith. I believe that this ever-present God is with me in this. All right. All right. Listen, these verses are about being invincible. Okay. Now, it's not about you being Superman or anything, a superwoman, right? But they speak to the parts of you that doesn't want to feel too much. All right. That is afraid that you're too sensitive to really that are afraid that your sensitivity makes you weak and was taught to muscle through emotions to muscle through emotions instead of sitting with them. All right. Listen, I want you to give yourself permission to say, this part of me isn't broken, right? It just needs a safe place to land. And that safety really lives in the spirit within me. Okay. And that safety really lives in the spirit within me. Okay. If that makes sense, put a one in the chart. Put a one in the chart. Put a one in the chat. Put a one in the chat again. Deuteronomy 31 and 6. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God goes with you. All right. So there is an ever present that is always with you. All right. So let's put today's Transformational Tuesday into practice, you guys. Let's put it into practice. All right. So our action steps for this morning is I want you to identify one common trigger. Okay, one common trigger that causes you to shut down. All right, one common trigger that causes you to shut down. I want you to ask, where did this begin? And then I want you to choose a new supportive phrase to anchor you. All right, I'm gonna put it up there. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so I want you to identify one common trigger that shuts you down. Ask, where did this begin? Right? Where did this begin? What does this moment remind me of? And then I want you to, oh, it's not showing. Okay. So, where did this begin? What does this moment remind me of? And then I want you to choose a new supportive phrase to really anchor, okay, anchor you the next time that triggers, okay? If you want a journal prompt to really journal today or something to journal about today, um, you can say, what emotional trigger has shaped how I respond to obstacles? Okay. So, what emotional trigger has shaped how I respond to obstacles? And how do I want to rewrite that script? All right. In today's affirmation on this Transformational Tuesday, I can face discomfort, guess what, without disappearing. I can name my needs without shame. Okay. I can face discomfort without disappearing, and I can name my needs without shame. Okay. Listen, I want to talk about I can face discomfort without disappearing. Okay. So, and I can name my needs without shame. A part of this is again not pushing through. Okay. It's you becoming aware of you not abandoning what you need. Now, when the trigger happens, you may need to what? Walk outside. You may need to get your space. You may need to do it, but you're not taking that act from hiding or avoiding. You're taking that action from self love and compassion. I need to walk away, right? I need to ground myself. I need to get safe in this moment. And you're responding to that trigger in a healthy way. Hiding would be very different. It's self-abandoning as avoiding, it's avoiding that feeling that's happening within and it's shutting down and it's getting distracted, right? And so the affirmation for today is that I can face discomfort without disappearing, right? And I can name my needs without shame. So I don't have to feel bad by saying, give me a minute. I don't have to feel ashamed about asking for what I want. All right. All right. Does that make sense? Oh, so okay. I can face discomfort without disappearing. I can name my needs without shame. All right. And then our intention for today, this Transformational Tuesday, is today I slow down, right? I slow down long enough. I slow down long enough to I slow down long enough to understand what I've been reacting to so that I can choose differently. Today, I slow down long enough so that I can understand what I've been reacting to so that I can what? So that I can choose differently. And if you want a bonus challenge, just to throw in on this Transformational Tuesday, or in your workbook this week. All right, listen, the bonus challenge is the next time you feel emotionally activated, pause, right? Get present. Don't do anything. Just pause, name it. Text yourself or journal. This is the trigger, not my truth. This is my trigger, not my truth. And I say text yourself. I don't know if you have your own text thread to yourself, but it's a healthy thing to do. And some of them texts that you want to be texting other people, just text it to you, right? Just text what you need to get out or journal. Okay. All right. And then we all know that I'm going to have a call, a challenge, and a charge. All right. So I'm calling and I'm asking you on this Transformational Tuesday, what trigger do you now see with clarity? All right. And then I'm going to challenge you this morning with what's one thing you can do to really respond differently the next time. And then the charge. Go shape your life with grounded power and grace. With grounded power and grace. Listen, if today's session really helped you name a pattern that you're ready to shift, right? And you are walking away with insight today, listen, drop a fire in the chat. Drop a fire in the chat. This is exactly if this session woke something up in you, and this is exactly the type of insight that we explore in those coaching labs. We don't just reflect, we help you to reshape. Again, so join us at Project Life, where we turn theory into practice, where we build emotional muscle and discipline, and where you stop feeling stuck and really start feeling supported. This is the last month. You can join that for $47 a month at SheilaLittle.com. Listen, remember, if you can shape it in your mind, you can have it in your life. I will see you tomorrow for Gratitude Shift Wednesday. We're talking about navigating obstacles. So obstacles, where do you feel fear in making the wrong decision? Okay, so we're talking about obstacles tomorrow, the obstacle of navigating obstacles, right? Where do you feel fear and making the wrong decisions? Listen, I love you. I love you. I love you. I will see you tomorrow for that life lesson. Till later.